the fourth in the series on prosperity. We had started off with prosperity and presence, knowing that we cannot have prosperity unless we are in this moment where God is. We then moved into prosperity and prayer, and how being in that place of asking and seeking and knowing is what brings forth our prosperity. Then last week we moved into prosperity and practice, because we know that it's not enough just to pray about it. We have to put feet to our prayers. And so this morning we're going to talk about the idea, the correlation of prosperity and peace. And as I say that, let's just take a moment to think about that idea of peace. Because when we are feeling peace, we're in a place where it flows. We feel calm. It's open. The stream can flow. Okay, I've said that. Calmness, serenity, peace. Let's go back to meditation. We can stay there all day, right? And then life happens. And when life happens, what happens? We lose that. We get out in our humanness and we go to a different place. And what often happens is we go to a place of conflict. There is some kind of conflict in our life. In the book, The Eye of the Storm, written by Reverend Gary Simmons, he says this about conflict. He says, conflict does not come to us, it comes from us. It arises from within as an effect of two competing intentions. A compelling desire to feel safe and okay and valued, and a drive to fulfill our soul's purpose, otherwise being fully in the creation of God. And so when our God self, our authentic self, meets our everyday, this is what it looks like self, we end up in a place of conflict. So I'm going to talk about what it looks like getting through the conflict so that we're in that place of flowing so that our prosperity can flow for us. And I'm going to do that through the F's. Now, the F's I'm going to talk about are face your fear, forgiveness, and claim your freedom. So first of all, I want to talk about face your fear. You see, that takes those ideas of strength and courage. Oftentimes we want to quietly, or not so quietly, hide behind our insecurities, that is our humanness. Edwene Gaines says in her book, The Four Spiritual Laws of Prosperity, she says, harboring a grudge completely blocks our ability to have peace of mind. Harboring a grudge. Now, I know none of us do that. Nah, not even for a minute. Not even for the guy who cuts you off in traffic. Not even for the person who might have taken money out of your wallet when you left it sitting somewhere. Not for the heater that doesn't work in the morning. None of us harbor grudges. What happens when we come to a place of conflict is we, in our humanness, in these bodies we have, and our emotions, go to that place of fight, fright, flight, or freeze. And some of us will do the same thing each time, and some of us will do a different thing each time. Sometimes we will fight, sometimes we will flight, we will flee, we'll take off and run away, and sometimes we just freeze and just wait for life to pummel us. So in the idea of conflict, what we know and what Gary Simmons reminds us is that nothing and no one is against us. And in Romans 8:31, it's read this way. What then are we to say about these things? If God is for us, who is against us? If God is for us, who is against us? Our ego self is against us. Nobody else. Nobody else. It's always our journey. It's always our personal conflict. Gary goes on to say that when we realize that this inherent conflict between one's soul and one's human nature plays out in daily life, we will see that what appears as an adversary in life is really a mirror of one's own resistance. A resistance and a defensiveness therefore arise out of those parts of ourselves that are not connected to our wholeness. Those parts of ourselves that are wanting to be healed. So if you're feeling some conflict today, whether it is with a situation, whether it's with an individual, whether it is with a group, whether it is with politics, or whether it's with ISIS, or whether it's with yourself, that conflict is that part of you that your soul wants to heal. So then we move on to this idea, okay, well, if I want to heal something, then how do I go about healing it? And so we move into that idea of after you have faced your fears, after you realize it's, oh my God, it's me. And you've taken that courage to say, oh my God, God, it's me, help me. Then we move into that place of forgiveness. Remember, forgive means to give forth. It is to bring something better out of what is already there. In Matthew 18:22, Jesus is queried, and he is queried by Peter. As Peter came and said to him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times. Now what does that really mean? Okay, how often should I forgive him? Get it? We forgive him, we forgive the situation as often as it takes until we realize that it's not him, it's not the situation, it's what's going on inside of us. And then we forgive ourselves, which means we give forth a new attitude about what's going on inside of us. Edwin Gaines says, are we really forgiving the situation with others? She puts it this way in her book. She says, we don't practice forgiveness for the benefit of the other guy. We do it for ourselves. So if you're having a problem with forgiveness, remember, it doesn't matter. The other guy's not inside your head. It's you who's doing the suffering. She also talks about the idea that to forgive is often we have to ask for that, a little bit of additional help. We have to remember to bring forth the Christ within us to do the work. That this is an act of will. And so it's our personal will guided with our God's will so that we can come to the higher place where we can heal ourselves. And she puts it this way, as forgiveness is an act of will. She says, you make yourself do it. You don't do it because it feels good. How many people say, I'm going to go out and forgive today because it feels good? I do. Good for you. Now, how often do you not do that? Yeah. We know it's the right thing to do because we know it eventually makes us feel better. But until we practiced it enough, until it becomes a daily thing, 70 times 7, then we're not in that place. She says we also don't because you want to do it. You do it because the Master told you to do it. That Christ within you told you. Are you hurting enough yet? Are you hurting enough yet? Are you really ready to let that go? Then this is what you need to do. You need to give forth a new way of looking at that. A new vision on what is calling for you. A new vision of what's mirroring back to you that will make you whole within yourself. She goes on to talk about, when we're talking about forgiveness, also talking about the idea of financial debt. You know, there's good financial debt and there's not so good financial debt. Financial debt, when it's an investment, is good financial debt. I kind of made a financial debt to this church because I knew it was an investment and it would come back, and it did. Thank you. And there's a not good financial debt when we go out and create it because, oh, we just want a new car and we don't want to wait. Or we don't think about the fact that in creating a debt, that what the other party's part in that debt is. You see, when you have a debt created, you have a debtor and you have a debtee. And there is a relationship there. And sometimes the person who's making the investment puts out the debt, like S, C, G, and E. And are we grateful for that? Or do we say, oh, my bill is so high and I can't afford it. Instead of, thank God we have heat. Thank God we have heat. So when we think of that financial debt, Edwina talks about this time that she got into debt. She had a husband who told her that he didn't like her anymore, and he left her. Well, and he left her with $60,000 of debt, which she found out after he left. And the debt was because a credit card was in her name. So she had a little bit of problem forgiving him for leaving her, not only leaving her, but leaving her with $60,000 of debt. And she realized somewhere along the line that she had some responsibility in that because the credit card was in her name. She never paid any attention to the bills coming in. She let him take care of the bills, but the credit card was in her name. You see, we have responsibilities for what happens financially as well as everything else in our life. We have the responsibility. We have the responsibility in this church to know if this church does not have what it needs. Well, that was interesting.
It was a message from God.
It was a message from God. We have this responsibility. Not just me, not just the person who makes out the checks, not just the 5 or 6 people who sit on the board. Each and every one of us, this is your church. You have that responsibility. You have the responsibility to see that we take care of this church well. We have the responsibility to clean up this church. We have this responsibility to clean up the property, to paint the walls, to pay the bills. We all have it. Not just the person who sits in there and writes the check, and not the person who signs it. So it's just wonderful when we realize that everything that happens in life comes back to us. It's our responsibility. And so when we think about that idea of even in financial debt, she says that you're not going to get out of it until you learn how to forgive. You see, if you're thinking about it as a debt and somebody's holding it against you, she had to learn how to forgive her husband. And when she did, $20,000 came in right away. I love Edwina Gaines because she was one of the first people who taught me prosperity. I went to a workshop of hers, and at that time I was $15,000 in debt. I'm going, how in the world am I ever going to get out of this debt? At that point, I don't think I had a job. I think I was between jobs. And she said, find a date. So I put it out 8 years. Well, within 3 years, I realized I was out of debt. But we did the forgiveness work. Yeah, I realized it was me who had set up that debt. I took the responsibility, and I did the work. So she says also this about this. She says that an unwillingness to forgive is like stabbing ourselves with a knife, expecting the person who did wrong to feel the pain. So if you get yourself in that place where you're feeling unforgiving of a situation or unforgiving of an individual, just to take that thought of stabbing yourself with a knife. Who's feeling the pain? The other person has no idea. And if it's a situation, well, there's no feelings involved at all in the situation. I would like to move now to this idea of claiming your freedom. You see, once we forgive, we can still feel tied to something because we feel tied to our unworthiness. We feel tied to the outer expression. So we need to move to that place where we claim our freedom, where we take the past and let it lie. We bury it, we flush it down the toilet, whatever we have to do with it. The past is past. We're in today. All we can do from the past is use it to move forward in a positive manner. And so we focus forward because the best is yet to be. Paul Tillich says the decision is a risk rooted in the courage of being free. So, do you want to be free? Do you want to be in that place where you feel tied to something in your mind, in your body, in your affairs? Or do you want to be free? Do you want to really be happy, joyous, and free? Well, one of the things that we can do is clean house. So we know that we clean house spiritually through prayer work. We know that we clean house emotionally by forgiveness. We clean house physically by doing the work. You know, if you want something new in your closet, you have to make room. You have to take that stuff and circulate it. Otherwise, you're going to be wearing the same old thing. If you want to have something new and fun to eat in your refrigerator, then you have to clean out all that stuff that's got mold in the back of it. And we need to think of forgiveness as emotional house cleaning. So when we get to that place where we're ready to clean house, where we're ready to be free, then think of all the levels that we have to do it on. This is how our prosperity shows up. We can do the physical, but as long as our emotional is still tied, we're not free. And until we free our emotional, we don't have that spiritual freedom because we're tied to what's going on here, right here on earth, instead of in all that life can be. Because life is so much more. So when I think of this idea, I think of, well, how do we really do it? How do we really do it? How do we move into a place of feeling at home? And I believe it was The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy is going, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Our authentic selves knows that the only place that home is with God, is in that truth of who we are. So when I think of this idea of home, I think of the H in home as being humility. Humility is the idea of character building and putting character building and spiritual values first. When we do that, when we put God first, seek ye the kingdom, all the material satisfaction is the byproduct. When we put the byproduct first, well, we want to be safe and secure in this material realm, what we get is that focus on the outer that keeps us from being free. When I think of home, I think of an openness. I think of that place where it's calm, it's comfortable. Being at home in your own skin. When you feel like you can do anything and be anything because that's who you are. You're at home in your own skin. I could take off my shoes here now. You might not like it, but I could take off my shoes now. Because I'm feeling comfortable right now. Because I'm feeling that I'm in the place of God and I am supported by God. I think of that idea of mindfulness, of being in that place that when I'm in this present moment, and when I'm here, I'm at peace, and so I'm mindful. I'm in a place where I can observe everything that's going on. I'm in a place where I can observe even when I'm saying things I wished I hadn't said, or I can do things I wished I hadn't done, or I can let anger well up in me, or I can let conflict come inside of me. But I am at home because I am in my observer place, in that place of mindfulness, knowing this is just playing out. There is this idea also of prosperity and peace, that when I'm at home, then I am enriched. Home is where I am. Home is where the heart is. Home is what I make of it. Some of us will talk about going home, and in our early days we had very loving homes. Other people will think about going home and go, I never want to go there again. Because they didn't have loving homes, and they might think of it as a house. It could be that home for some people is where you felt the love the most, or where you feel the love the most now. Home for me used to be D.C., but once I left the D.C. area, it was no longer home for me. It just wasn't. That's not where I felt my love. So what I'm saying is that when we look at being at home with ourselves and at peace with ourselves, we're in a place where we have gained our freedom. All is forgiven at the moment, because, this is only one of 70 times 7. Next moment might be different, and I have to forgive again. And I can face my fears because I've got God on my side, and if God is for me, who's against me? So this is your challenge for this week. Whenever, whoever, whatever takes you out of your peace and puts you in conflict this week, remember 70 times 7. And remember that this is a mirror to grow your spirituality, to bring you back into wholeness. So, take 5 good things to say about that person or that situation. 5 qualities. And this may be hard, because I'm going to give you an example. And this might help you to see life in a different perspective, too. Take an extremist. Like, say, somebody who's with ISIS. And what would you say would be 5 good things about that person? Well, right now you might have to think about it. They're loyal to their God, their belief system. They're persistent in their ideals. They're dedicated to doing what they are expected to do for themselves. They may be self-starters. They love life enough to give it up. See how this works? See, each and every one of us, if we really believe what we say, are in oneness, which means each and every one of us is here to grow another soul. And no matter what we think of whatever is causing conflict in our lives, which keeps us from that place of peace, which keeps us from our home of prosperity, we have the ability to change that thought and heal ourselves back to wholeness. Edwin Gaines says it this way: and as with tithing, we must learn to forgive freely, joyfully, and completely. Then we will have peace. And then we will understand we are always prosperous. God bless you.